morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to Dreamy Dreamland with your Sensei Al Bob. Here I am, at one of my Rango spots. And the other day, yesterday, Monday, was Memory Day, Memorial Day. We have just been through a number of, the world is at war, and we basically instigated pretty much all of it, right? And so here we go. We're going to start in with Chris Hedges, and it's going to be a Chris Hedges day.
In the months of July and September 1940, the French historian and future resistance fighter Marc Bloch, who fought in World War I and World War II, wrote a short book called L'Étrange Défaite, or Strange Defeat. It was a searing condemnation of the French high command and political class, which was responsible for the humiliating defeat and disintegration of the French army with the Nazi invasion of France. Bloch, who went underground to fight the Nazi occupiers, was executed by the Gestapo in 1944. His book, published after the war, was the model for historian Andrew Bacevich's own book, After the Apocalypse. In his book, Bloch wrote, "Our war, up to the very end, was a war of old men, or of theorists who were bogged down in errors engendered by the faulty teaching of history. It was saturated by the smell of decay." Bacevich is no less censorious of the political and military class that has led the United States into one debacle after the next since Vietnam, a war he served in as a young officer. He argues the ruling elites are woefully out of touch with reality, crippled by self-delusion, and unable to adapt to a changing world. Unless they are wrenched from power, he argues, the twilight of the American empire, the one that will be filled, especially given our refusal to seriously address the climate change, with catastrophe after catastrophe. Joining me to discuss his book, After the Apocalypse, is retired Army Colonel Andrew Bacevich, also an emeritus professor of history and international relations at Boston University. He is the co-founder and president of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. So, as somebody who writes polemics, I love your book. But very early on, you talk about the four horsemen of the apocalypse: rancor, pestilence, want, and fury, comprising our own homemade apocalypse. Just explain, flesh that out.
Well, I wrote this during the early stages of the coronavirus pandemic, which was in and of itself, of course, a disturbing event, not only disturbing in the havoc it wreaked in American society, but also, of course, the ineptitude with which the government authorities responded. But at the same time, evidence of the climate crisis was becoming impossible to ignore. And at the same time, of course, many factors, but primarily the pandemic, were creating enormous damage in the economy, millions of Americans themselves. My focus for the past 20 years or so, I guess, has been on the failures of U.S. national security policy. And it just seemed to me that these other events occurring on top of our abysmal military record showed that something was fundamentally amiss with our country and what we imagined ourselves to be and what we actually were. So it was in that mood that I wrote the book.
Very early on, you talk about Madeleine Albright, and this is a quote that she made on the Today Show. "If we have to use force, it is because we are America. We are the indispensable nation. We stand tall and we see further than other countries into the future." And then you write, 4 days after Albright spoke, the World Islamic Front proclaimed a jihad against Jews and crusaders, co-authored by Osama bin Laden, then an obscure militant Islamist. That document identified the expulsion of U.S. forces from the Arabian Peninsula as a moral imperative requiring the support of Muslims worldwide. Here beckoned the actual future, one to which Albright and other members of the foreign policy establishment would remain steadfastly oblivious until the World Trade Center collapsed in a pile of smoke and debris and dust. I want to talk about that disconnect because it's a constant theme in the book, which I think would go by the name self-delusion on the part of the military and political elite, and how disconnected it is from the actual reality they're confronting.
Well, maybe I'm a little unfair in singling out Madeleine Albright for treatment in the book, but I do think that she embodied, and that particular infamous quote embodies, a mindset that permeates the political establishment. It really reaches beyond the political establishment into intellectual and media circles.
So
What's the essence of the view? The essence of the view is that we define the future. That we are called upon to shape the future, and of course, inevitably to shape it in our own image.
Right.
When I state it so baldly, it sounds preposterous.
So all you have to do is go back to 1947, the National Security Act.
Yeah, that's what I believe. But regardless,
And that's where, America was always, you have to realize that the hidden hand is supported by three pillars in this group. There is the Vatican, there is the City of London, and there is Washington, D.C., District of Columbia. It's not part of America, just like the Vatican isn't part of Rome, and the City of London is not part of the UK, right? They have their own laws, their own rituals, their own police, their own control mechanisms, and their power is planetary. I mean, the Catholic Church, you could make a thing about the Catholic Church was because it sent out a papal bull saying that any white Christian who went into any place in the world where there weren't Christians, they could act like whoever was there didn't exist. So the Middle East, Africa, which Middle East is Africa, the New World, United States, Central America, Mexico, and South America were all, there for European white male imperialism, and that's what we're talking about here. And when the New York Times does, a thing about the 1620 or whatever that thing they did, where they just go on and on about race. You have to realize that the main race is a smokescreen, right? The black folk were property, but so were the Irish immigrants, so were the Italian immigrants, so were the German immigrants, so were the Chinese and Japanese. They had no rights. Look at World War II. They took all these Japanese folk, close to 1 million of them, who were all American citizens who had all been born here pretty much, if not one or two or three generations, and they put them in concentration camps. They didn't kill them, but they put them in not the nicest, out in the middle of the desert someplace, and surrounded by barbed wire. And if the people tried to get away from the bomb, break out, they got shot dead. And the Second Amendment has nothing to do about you owning a gun. It's about having a well-ordered militia. And who is that well-ordered militia for? The Southerners were not going to sign the Constitution. They were going to do their own thing because they were making the money. They had cotton. Cotton was king. They had a zero-sum economic plan where they owned the means of production, meaning the workers. They didn't have to pay for them, right? And they could take whatever, they could sell them, they could breed them. So this thing ain't, it's all about transactional materialism, right? It's all about bling. It's all about stuff, right? And so, do you like being a slave? Now, I live out in the middle of the woods. I have for the last 20 years. I mean, I really didn't live there full time until 2017, right? But, I bought the joint in around 2000, and, I slowly made it into the little garden of paradise that it is. And then it was a, defunct gated community, and I kept the rich people from buying in because I'd meet them at the front door wearing my Dallas Texas cheerleader underpants and nothing else except pink flip flops with Mickey Mouse on it. And I'd have a Mickey Mouse plastic Disney banjo that had a little crank, and I had a plastic pie hat. It was like made from recycled, garbage bags, and they squeezed it into a thing that looked like a straw hat, but it wasn't. It was made out of plastic, right? And so I'd be there, and I would go, ooh, because people would drive by because they were scared because they're on this bumpy road and they'd be coming by in their Lexus or their Land Rover or their, Mercedes. And I go, ooh, you got a pretty mouth. And that's all it took to keep folks away, right? And there were a few houses that they would be bought and people would move in and then they couldn't stand living there because they'd have to face themselves. And that's what Captain, Colonel Sanders and Grandpa, I mean, they're melting down right now. I mean, it was like unbelievable, and they're in shock, they're in trauma. And that is the problem, is the hidden hand keeps the masses of the population in trauma. So when you talk about race, you talk about divergence of the economy, the super rich and everybody else who's just, I live on that, I have $60 worth of food stamps because I told the truth. I said, oh, it's just me. And so that's it, and there, maybe you might have to work. So when I went in for an interview about that, I don't have a walker anymore, but I do have one of those grandma potties that works great as a walker. So I walked in with my grandpa potty and sat down to be interviewed, and and I have the leg braces on my legs, and they're looking at me, and I got the welder's goggles on, and they're looking at me and how do you think about and I just drank like 3 cups of coffee before I went in there, and so he said, what do you think about unloading trucks, right? I got the leg braces, I got the walking potty, and I also have a bucket. So I go, just wait a minute. I get up, I put the bucket under it, I lift up the seat, I take my pants down to my knees. Yeah, I don't expose myself. And I sit on there and I unload the 3 cups of coffee into the bucket. And boy, does it smell. And so I get up, I kind of take my sleeve and wipe my hole. And the guy, he's like, and he goes and vomits in the bucket, his own bucket, his waste paper basket. And I said, oh, good. And so I then pour my bucket into his waste paper bucket and sit down to continue the interview. He goes, it's over. You're disabled. And so I hobbled out of there. But they were talking about putting a 70-something-year-old guy, unloading trucks. I can't let my hand, arms above this, right? I have osteoarthritis. I got charcoal legs. You name it, I got it. And yes, I'm in. As my endocrinologist says, I am the best-looking, healthiest dead guy he knows. He goes, "There's so many things wrong with you. You should be dead. You shouldn't have any legs. You shouldn't have any heart. You shouldn't have any liver. You shouldn't have any kidneys. But they all seem to be working, even though they're extraordinarily damaged." That's what prayer does, like every morning wake up in amazing pain. I meditate and pray to God's unconditional love. I said, okay, buddy, here I am to serve you in love co-creation. What do you want me to do today? Right? All right. Mixed tea. I'll take a little bit more.
All right.
And
Did you decide?
Oh, I have meatloaf.
You're gonna do the meatloaf?
Yep.
All right.
Meatloaf and mac and cheese.
Meatloaf and mac and cheese.
Thank you, Miss T.
You're welcome.
Yep. She's a real sweet, really sweet person, but in a better palm, and she's like everyone, severe trauma. I gave her a number of mantras to clear that up when I saw it. So it's been a month since I've been here and have her wait on me, and she forgot that I even talked to her. It was a clean slate, and and my mother used to pretend she had dementia, so she could do that. She would get annoyed with my father instead of picking up the annoyance. She would pretend she, was, I'd be there, and the girls would be there, and meaning the people who took care of her, and she'd go, "Who's that man?" Pointing to my father. She'd know all the girls. She'd know me. She wanted to know what I'm reading, and we'd discuss it in a theological way. And but my dad would, "Oh, it's me, honey, your lover boy. I don't know you." That was her way to, she was going, and she was gonna, all the misery my father put everyone through. If you ever read the book The Great Santini, that's straight out of our family. Except my father didn't beat us up. I mean, he put his fist. There was a point we had this new house, and I moved in there in about a year or two. By this time, my oldest sister was already in college. My brother was already in college. My sister was at a private girls' school because she was Lolita. And it was just me, basically, by the third year. And I was heading towards seminary school. But when, my father was there, that first 2 years, I mean, he had so much stress on him, and all the stuff he went through in the Air Force. I mean, he had hypoglycemia. He wouldn't eat. He'd work, and not eat anything. Come home and be like, right? And he's Sicilian, right? So he'd put his. I mean, it was a time when he ripped every door off the jam. And I remember two of my friends came over to visit with me because we had a pool, and we went in, and my mom was giving us cookies, and it kind of looked down the hallway, and all the doors to all the bedrooms were because my sisters and brothers would get in a big argument with my father, go into their bedroom, and in this first house we had where we each had our own bedroom. My oldest sister got a big, queen size bedroom. My other sisters got littler bedrooms, but still, something 12 by 18. My brother got something like that, and I got something that was 6 foot. It was a closet with a window. And that was okay by me, because I had the basement. I turned it into my lab. I had the whole house wired. I was tape recording everyone's conversation. My brother on the phone was, "Please, I just want to hold you. Please, I just want you to hold me." Oh, I mean, we had HVAC, so we had ducts, so I put a speaker in one of them, and I would play that stuff back. So you could barely kind of hear it, but you could hear it. It was I was a cheeky monkey. What can I say, But not as cheeky as what's going on, So I got an education that was beyond, Cardinal Cushing was my godfather. And when I got murdered by that nun in first grade, I was stuck with the Marinals, which wasn't stuck. It was great. It was we lived in a castle. It was a sanctuary, not a missionary. And they were all scholars. And so they worked on me, to enable me to hear out of this, see out of this, and to speak. Because I couldn't speak. Here's another good one.
social media platforms, private corporations. Democratic debate and dialogue have all but vanished in the United States. There's widespread censorship imposed by social media platforms, private corporations about which we know nothing, while they know everything about us. Mainstream news outlets champion censorship and deplatforming in the name of democracy. Brian Seltzer, for example, on CNN justified banning Donald Trump from social media because, as he said, quote, reducing a liar's reach is not the same as censoring freedom of speech. Sean Hannity on Fox News spent 40 minutes talking over former New York Mayor Bill de Blasio, the same tactic CNBC host Rick Santelli used to shut down debate about COVID-19. The impulse is to silence opponents rather than engage in dialogue and debate. This extreme polarization, as Stephen Levitsky and Daniel Zibald write in How Democracies Die, is one of the primary signs of a failing democracy. Nolan Higdon, a lecturer at Merrill College and the Education Department at University of California, Santa Cruz, and Mickey Huff, the director of Project Censored and the president of the nonprofit Media Freedom Foundation, joined me to discuss this dangerous inability to communicate among antagonistic groups in the United States and all issues raised in their new book, Let's Agree to Disagree, a critical thinking guide to communication, conflict management, and critical media literacy. I think this book's a very fine primer, not only in terms of how we can discuss issues, but I think you do a very good job of dissecting the nature of the media itself. I want to begin with, you actually open it by quoting the great Eldridge Cleaver, but I want to begin by this polarization, this inability to communicate, and how you believe we got here. Why don't we talk with you, Mickey, first?
Well, thanks for having us on, Chris. It's an honor to be here with you. And this is our second book together, Nolan Higdon and I. The first book we did together was called United States of Distraction, Media Manipulation of Post-Truth America and What We Can Do About It. And in that book, we really outlined at least a half a century of the decay of our social, political institutions, privatization, sort of a collapse of the public sphere. So all of this is a long time coming. And what we noticed in coming out of the last book we did together, we had a chapter called Make America Think Again, which we could argue about in terms of its historical accuracy. But the sentiment was that we really need to engage each other on the basis of transparently sourced facts. We need historical context. We need to support public institutions.
And see what they miss, all of these guys. And this is why they are the loyal opposition, even though they seem so, whoop-de-doo, Jimmy Dore, Chris Hedges, Scott Ritter et al. All those people, they're the loyal opposition, because they do not go to the main fact. 2 or 3 shows ago, I had the guy talking about fascism. He was getting close to it. And he never gave the real definition of fascism, which is, so we have capitalism, which is where capital controls the polity, right? We have socialism, where the state controls the polity. In essence, communism is is state capitalism, right? And basically, capitalism is corporate socialism, right? So that's why those things they're like mirrored images. Russia, the United States are mirrored images because they were manufactured by the same folks, manufactured by people like the Rothschild family, the Rockefeller family. And those are just the poster books. You don't get to see the hidden hand. That's why they call it the hidden hand. The dark state. You don't get to see that, right? This whole thing with our credit card, our debt ceiling, this has all been a scam to like, oh my God, I'm not going to get my check. Well, I live on $400, right? And if that check didn't come, it would be very difficult. You wouldn't see me because I wouldn't have money. And $400 is like, to my discretionary spending, right? And that's gasoline to come see you guys, right? To get this meal here, right? To eat this Trek. And this is the best Trek. A town really sucks when the best restaurant in town is Cracker Barrel. I mean, that's like, what? So, that was Chris Hedges. Let's see. We're going to go look at what other Chris Hedges stories we got here. Maybe we. Here's a good one.
So they were.
Is no longer within the lost promise American universities in the 1960s. The American dream of high quality, affordable mass higher education is no longer within reach of many Americans. Tuitions, once low, if not free, have soared. With them, tremendous student debt. Although the Biden administration has made an effort to reduce some of this debt, millions of students, graduates, and dropouts still.
And one of the things that he let go as a concession to the rabid Republicans was to get rid of that.
Be careful with it.
Good.
But there you are. And I forgot your ketchup.
Bring me some ketchup.
Yes, sir. I'll be back with the ketchup.
Do. At least it's one.
Yeah, I'm fairly new here, so I would assume it's just like a biscuit sandwich. Is what most breakfast sandwiches are. Yeah. Oh my God, it's good though. It is good. It's expensive. Yeah.
I can give this a C plus.
Sounds good.
There you are, sir.
Can I have 2 little biscuits?
Yes, sir. You're welcome.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah, you guys got a bunch of. Yes, ma'am. I'm going to my junior year at App State. Yeah, it's been really good. Yeah. Oh man, it's great. I love the customers. Yes, yes, no, thank you. We get that put in you guys. I'll have that soon as possible.
I'm sorry, sir. We're out of biscuits for a little bit.
Okay, don't worry. When you get some, bring it.
All right. You're welcome.
I'm not in any hurry. 29 minutes and 29 seconds. No comment, right? So, let's go back to Chris. Now you watch me eat.
Students, graduates, and dropouts still owe a staggering $1.6 trillion. State legislators and the federal government have dramatically slashed funding to public universities, forcing them to seek support from corporations and reduce most faculty to the status of poorly paid adjuncts, often lacking benefits as well as job security. Nearly 75% of the instruction at colleges and universities is in the hands of adjuncts who have no hope of being granted tenure. Public institutions, which serve 80% of the nation's students, are chronically short of funding and basic resources. Higher education has evolved, even at major research universities, into primarily vocational training, no longer a vehicle for learning, instead, one about economic mobility. The assault sees elite schools where tuitions can run as high as $80,000 a year, cater to the wealthy and the privileged, locking out the poor and the working class.
And when I was in universities in the 90s, that's what I saw. I saw it when I first got there in 91. I realized this was the end of the show because I went to college in 68, 70. I mean, 69, 70. And it sure was a different thing, right? It cost my parents $1,100, room and board and tuition, right? To go to a grade B plus to Hofstra, right? And that was the top 10% liberal arts. It wasn't like Harvard or Yale or one of those, but I went. And almost, I was heading into my third semester. It's like my high school, I got a better education. I learned to, speak, learned Latin and Greek. I studied physics and chemistry and biology, right? I learned, not just algebra, but trigonometry and political science and law. These are all things I learned in high school, right? Economics. Plus, I went to school with the richest kids in the world. My roommate was Joe Kennedy, right? I met Robert Kennedy. The school was right on the border of Massachusetts and New Hampshire in a town called Toy Town. It's like where all the toys were made. So in the 1890s up till the Great Depression, it was a hot town. They had a lot of money. They had a great downtown. They had a great public gymnasium with an Olympic swimming pool. They had a 6-meter diving platform. I mean, this was at its zenith. It had a golf course with the rich guys, right? And that was our school. It went into receivership, and a bunch of these rich guys bought it because it was basically a prison for their kids, right? Because we all had gotten, I started a rebellion in a Catholic seminary, right? I really, turned things upside down. And 30 years after that, I was at a rainbow gathering, sitting around a fire in A camp, and we were telling stories. I was telling stories about, fermenting revolution in this Catholic seminary. And she goes, "You're talking about Canterbury, aren't you?" I said, "Oh yeah." "Are you Al?" I said, "Yeah." "Oh, you're a living legend. I went to school there." I said, "You went to school there?" It was an all-boys seminary. Well, times changed. It just became a prep school for rich Catholic people. And so, and they said, "That school changed because of you." I went to there because of you, right? So she became my girlfriend. And we had a great old time. And after gathering, she had one of those black credit cards, her mommy's credit card. So we rented a car, because I didn't have a car. We rented a car and drove all over America, right? We went to LA, stayed in this really beautiful, strange hotel in LA, 1930s, had bungalows. We had the same place that John, what's his name? Guy who did Blues Brothers, John, and the big tall guy, Canadian. Anyway, that's where he died of an overdose. We went there. Right? And then we got an airplane and went to Hawaii. The last time I went to Hawaii. And stayed right in Diamond Head at a big fancy hotel. Let's go ahead. She could buy whatever she wanted. Right? So we just bought the clothes. We had a great old time. We were on the road for about almost 2 months. Came back from Hawaii. And we flew into we fly into? We flew into LA and then we flew to Las Vegas.
Would you like a little more coffee, sir?
Oh, yes, please.
There you
Look
go.
at
There you go.
So we decided that we were going to go backwards across the desert and go up to Branford or where that place is where all the rich people are. It's kind of groovy for rich people and they have lots of entertainment, blah, blah, blah. So we were driving slow. I mean, bing banging our way from Las Vegas up to wherever that place was. And, we were on whatever interstate it was, 40, I guess, maybe. And we got up at 40 and we were on Route 66. And Route 66 doesn't exist. There's chunks of it. So we just had to, go on chunks of it. And stop off in little towns. So we stopped out at this motel in this little town. And then we got on the road and we had breakfast in this one little place, in this one little town, and we went to the next. And we were thinking about stopping, and we said, so what's the next town that's kind of bigger than this and has kind of a nice restaurant? Not that your Greasy Spoon is bad, but and the guy went, oh yeah, it's about 50 miles up. It's right there. It's nice. It's actually got trees, and it's been there for 100 years, and it's kind of nice. So we went up there, and halfway, again, we got hungry, and we stopped out of a little place right in the middle of nowhere, about 15, 20 miles outside this big town, and we decided to get a little something to eat, just like a snack, no big meal, so we could drive around that town and not be hungry and find a good place to stay and a place to eat. Right? And a good place to stay had to not have bed bugs, had to have HBO and a swimming pool, right? And have a suite. We could have a suite, right? Anyway, so we're at that place and she goes to the powder room. Thank you, darling.
You're welcome.
And so she basically goes to the little ghost room, and this black LTD drives up, and this woman gets out. These two big guys get out. They look like muscle. They're wearing JCPenney suits and got sunglasses on. And the LTD is definitely a government car. It's got all kinds of antennas on it, right? So, this is in the early O's. And after 9/11. And they get out, open the door, put out the hand. His hand grabs the guy's hand, and he helps her out of the car. Very attractive woman, maybe in her 50s, wearing a $200 suit. Her sunglasses are like $200, and she has a nice hat on. And one guy stays by the car, another guy follows her in and stays by the door. Another guy who is in the car goes around towards the back. Right? And so anyway, I'm watching this. They come through the door. The guy stays by the door. She walking towards me. And she basically sits down and I don't know this lady from the hologram, but I know exactly who and where she came from. Homeland Security. And she said she was, special agent, so and so, district supervisor. And I said, what part of the world? She goes, North America, that's my district. He's in charge of, security. I said, so she said, Homeland Security. I thought it was just, aren't you that? Yeah, no. She goes, I have more power than he does. I said, oh, you represent the hidden hand. She kind of smiled. She goes, yes, I've heard about you. And I'm here to talk to you. I go, about what? My daughter. Your daughter? And right away, she looks just, the girl I'm hanging out with, who's maybe 25, looks just like mom, but better looking and a little more spunky in certain ways. And anyway, so I said, I should have guessed because of the black credit card. She just keeps smiling and goes, I said, so what are you here to kill me and take her to some mind control place? And she goes, oh, no, I wouldn't work with her. You're doing a great job. And she says, we saw you at we had our people at the gathering in Vermont. We saw you have what you did. We watched you do what you did in Ithaca. Right? I said, I feel honored, right? And so she goes, so, you have, what I want you to do is keep doing this and bring her back to my home and speak to the good idea of her finishing school. What are you going to do with your life? Don't you want to do something you want to do? Hasn't been this a good adventure to put perspective in, you know how to spin it. We know your, who you are, what you do, right? So do it, right? And I will be eternally grateful and a hidden hand also. So, that was in, that's 2002 maybe. Anyway, or maybe even 2001. Oh, she gets up, walks away, and she leaves me her card. Just, has her name and title and a phone number. She goes, I answer this one. No one else does. Me. Need anything, just call it. Okay. That's great. And she goes, if you haven't noticed, you really haven't had any, no one has questioned you. No one has interrupted your journey. Thank you, dear. And that's because we have a nice little umbrella on it. Okay. So, long and the short of it, we spent another month or so. I brought her to New York and showed her a good time in New York. And then took her back to her home in Connecticut. Where, her mom, but let's go with mom. She knew her mother. She knew what her mother did. She knew what was going on. She knew that she was always being followed. That's why she pushed the envelope at every point, and no one said anything, And we did stuff in Las Vegas that could have been like, Robert De Niro's and Goodfellas, whatever that movie. And like she was sharp. She could count numbers almost as good as my mom. And they didn't stop her. Didn't take the bank, but they frowned on that. We basically, and I stayed at their house. They had a very nice house in Connecticut, right on the Long Island town. Swimming pool, tennis court, spent 2 or 3 days. And then she went off to do something, and I stayed there. And her mother said, okay, you did a great job. She gave me an envelope. I want you out of here, Mike, before she comes back. Okay. Never heard of her from that young girl. So she was, let's say she was 25 in the year 2000. So that's 30 years. She's probably got her mother's job. She's probably watching this video. And she's probably one person who is. Susan, how you doing? I'm doing good, as I always am. As my endocrinologist says. Best looking, healthiest dead guy he knows, right? But how are you doing? You know? What are you doing with your consciousness? Are you consciously intent? Are you consciously aware? Hmm? So, what do you think? How's it going? What are you doing? What time is it? 12. I love it. I'm always doing good. Because there is no sense to do anything other than that. I'm always conscious intent. Yes, 40%. Oh, I guess no, 37%. I'm still a moron. Well, hey, I'm in a mud puppet. What then, But when I'm consciously I'm consciously being aware as best as I can. I can't be perfect, but I can do my best. So, like the other day, yesterday, it was Memorial Day, all those dead bodies, and Colonel Sanders, and the tweakers, and it's coming to blows up there. His wife can't stand it. His kids can't stand it. He's drunk all the time. He's running around trying to make money. I'm sure he's making enemies with every endeavor. And somebody's nasty dog showed up and attacked everyone. And he's always carrying a gun, like he's Roy Rogers, right? Well, he had, as legal boys, people would say, liability to off that dog. Dog's on his property. I mean, in Tennessee, you can shoot somebody's dog. They're going after their chickens. This dog came and ripped up the place. This guy, Colonel Sanders, has 8 dogs, right? And there's one dog chewed up the 4 biggest, baddest. The other 2 dogs that have a big bark ran into the house and hid under the bed, because they're pussies. And I'm not using it in pejorative or a maleist point, but people who just, I'm a bad guy, right? I'm not a bad guy, right? But I'm consciously aware. I see stuff going on. I stay 3 blocks away. I mean, I went to, a Shinto temple. I helped build a Shinto temple in Putney, Vermont, right? And part of our exercise, we were becoming monks, healer scholar monks. That's what we were being trained to be. But part of that training was martial arts, jujitsu and aikido. Right? Those 2 things are almost like on either side of the mirror. But I know how to get away. And the best way to get away is consciously aware what's going on 3 blocks away. Well, anyway. What happened to my lid? So anyway, so there's strangeness coming down the pike. I mean, it's been strange since Jack had whacked. It's been strange since 1947, when we started knocking down. There was a. So, sir, did you serve in the military?
Yes, I did.
Where?
Air Force, I was New York and Charleston, South Carolina.
In Strategic Air Command.
Yep, exactly.
My father was a colonel. He was General. The guy with a cigar. What's his name? The guy who ran SAC, who invented SAC. Curtis Lemay. He was his adjutant. My dad ran. He was a bird colonel. Ran everything. Never flew an airplane, but he sent thousands of people to their death during World War II.
Yeah, I didn't fly any airplanes. I just kept them flying.
Yeah, you were a tech. So what did you go do after that?
I've done a long course. Right now, I work for Pratt Whitney.
On engines, you were an engine guy?
I am now. I do non-destructive testing metals. Randy T.
Yeah. So I was the only, there was 6 of us, and I was the only one who was, I was gaga for technology and airplanes. I became an engineer.
Yep.
The rest of my brothers and sisters were like, well, out there being a rebel without a cause, right? And so my dad, hey, you want to go to Edwards? Sure. When I was 6, I saw an above ground nuclear test that totally rearranged my worldview. And yep, and it was 3 a.m. I did like lead tape over me and welding glasses, and we were facing away from the blast. And a 0. It was like quiet, there's no explosion sound, but this light like you couldn't believe. And it burnt our shadows on the concrete wall that we were facing. And then the big wind came, and these 2 big guys held me from flying away. And then my father turned around, and all this light was going up, colors you couldn't even describe. And I'm wearing welder's glasses, and I can see this. And he said, put your hand in front of your face. I could see the bones in my hand. And we were 20 miles away from him. So that kind of brought reality to my
Yep.
And then I went to lots of bases, went to Edwards. My dad was a technical guy, not so much like you. He was an administrator of technology.
Okay.
He understood it, knew where it needed to go, how it had to fit, but he just barked orders. And by going with my dad, I was the only one who got along with my parents because my father would bark an order and I'd say, yes, sir, right away, and then go up and do whatever I wanted because colonels never checked up on things. They had sergeants and lieutenants to do that.
Yeah.
And we didn't have that in our family. Because my mom was the general. He was a colonel. She was in charge.
I see.
And she just sat back in the lazy boy, drinking her Manhattan and smoking a cigarette. And had my dad do
Whatever.
Did you ever read The Great Santini? Or see the movie?
I've seen parts of the movie. I know what you're talking about.
You need to read that book. You a reader?
Yes,
You're
I
a
am.
reader. Read that book. I'm sure it's in the library.
Uh-huh.
You would love it because
It
it's
was I've read blurbs and seen some documentaries. It was
go get it. I bought it. It was amazing. Where on that side of the mountains near John State, there's a good used bookstore, right? And I said, "Oh, look at this!" I bought it and I read it last week, and it's amazing because it was just like my father. The guy had the same kind of PTSD as that guy did.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was a very intense
Period of time.
period of time. Yeah.
And it still is. See, I think the biggest problem we have isn't race, isn't gender, isn't any of that. That most of America is suffering from PTSD.
Well, there's a lot of folks who came out of the military. that
Yeah, but
never got
they're not even they're kids who got whacked, who are in a housing project where they have to worry about the rats eating their toes. Going to bed. 40 million kids go to bed hungry in America.
I know.
We're the richest country in the world. We don't have a single payer of health care. All the rest of the industrial, they take care of their people. They put people in college. They give people a house. We are meant to be traumatized because that's the only way they can control us. It's a control mechanism more than anything else. So you never went in country, but you knew a lot of people who did, right?
Oh, I mean, plenty.
Yeah, and a lot of people didn't come back. Did you ever go to Vietnam? You weren't at any of those bases there,
No. Knew a lot who were
but you stayed basically.
down stateside. I just stayed in, out of going across the planet.
So did you do? Were you teaching or were you?
I was actually inspecting aircraft.
And the metallurgy side,
Yep.
looking for the stresses and all that kind of stuff.
Got it. Yep.
So I went to Edwards was the really weird place because just over there was Area 51, and it was a lot of. I mean, whatever they say about it is nothing compared to
What it actually was.
I would say. Most of the stuff that people see that they call flying saucers are ours.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I agree with that. There was a lot of things that we did back in the day that people thought was something else. It was ours.
They because in the 40s, guys like Tesla were already working on gravimagnetics. Right?
Yeah.
So they
Yeah.
had that.
Most of that stuff was ours.
And so that stuff that people see up there,
Yeah. What UFOs?
because aliens, they're here, but they don't need a ship. They go into the bathroom in their house and end up in the bathroom here at, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They don't need a ship.
Yep.
And so, yes, we've always lived in strange times, but we're coming to this place where something is going to force us to reevaluate our worldview.
A lot of things that make us reevaluate.
Yeah. And most people aren't. They're self-medicated.
Yeah. I agree with that.
On whether it's, I worked in the corporate world, and I self-medicated to the point I weighed 480 pounds and died. Now I'm a really good-looking dead guy, and I only weigh 198.
There you go.
That's why I'm kind of still here.
Right. I
But
agree.
it totally destroyed my knees. 4 pounds times 580 pounds on my
Destroyed some parts.
everything. And I didn't let them cut me. I didn't let them replace it. I did physical therapy. I did all that stuff, and I lost all the weight. And I do this maybe once a month.
Want to splurge?
Well, do you live here?
No, I live in Asheville.
Oh man, I lived in Nashville from '91 to '99 when it was the best. There was no one there.
Asheville has changed a lot.
Oh, beyond. I mean, I went to pick a friend up at the airport. That freaking highway from the airport to Asheville is 16 lanes. It used to not even be an interstate.
Yeah, I know.
It used to be 25. So when did you move there?
18 years ago.
Oh, then you have a sense of what it was.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
There's a lot different then.
Right.
18 years ago.
Oh, yes, a big time. I got there in '91. I left in '99. You got there probably in 2002 or 3.
Yeah, 03, I think, yeah.
No, yeah, you saw it just as it was picking up steam.
Unfortunately, I liked it back then better.
You know, the big fancy old hotel where the Nazis stayed during World War II, Grove Park Inn. That's now called
Yeah, the Grove Park. Yeah.
right. I used to live across the street in the only apartment building. And I had all these old ladies, and I had a 3-bedroom, gigantic with a garage, all my utilities for $75 a month. Right?
I wish.
And I used to have these parties every Friday where we get blitzed in my place. Then there was no fence there. The sprinklers would go on at 10 at night, and we get butt naked and slide down the hill and end up in Elaine's. Do you ever go to Elaine's, the nightclub? Right? We'd end up, because you could walk off the golf course into Elaine's, and we'd be in our underwear covered in grass clippings. And no one cared. We were like the entertainment.
Yeah. Free entertainment.
Yep. So then we'd go and swim, and then we'd do that till the sun rose, and then we'd go have breakfast and pretend we were there. We would get the big robes from the swimming pool locker and go in, and no one cared.
No, not bad.
No, and you could get a really nice little room in Grove Park for $25 a night.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. So anyway, I have this knack of being in places at the right time.
Right.
And that's a good. It's good. It's like a blessing and a curse because you kind of pine for what it was.
Yeah.
But,
It'd be nice to go back to what it was.
but it can't.
That's
Never gonna happen. Well,
It's good talking to
let's see your palm. The hand you write with. The one you write. Put it up like this. Honest, the day is long. You really can't. You've been in the Air Force so long, you can't stand humanity. And whoa, way vivid dreams, big time rock and roll dreams. See, turning in this way. Smart, but you know why you're really good at working on engines and still maybe are, is that you don't go by the book. You kind of put your hands on it and can feel what's wrong. You have an intuition about technology that most people don't have. That's why you didn't go to Vietnam. They knew, okay, we can't send this guy there. We don't want him to die. There are too many of them, right? You were that kind of, when no one could figure it out, you could. And that's why you're working at Pratt & Whitney at, what are you, 70? Right, so let's see more side of this year here. So the one thing you really haven't been able to get over, even though intellectually you understand this, you still worry too much. And you understand, you've been through a lot. You got that perspective. I'm blessed. I shouldn't worry. Everything's fine. So do. Why? Get a hobby. Yes. It's nice talking with you, buddy. Later. So that's what I do. That's why I got paid the big bucks. Yeah. That's what I can do for you guys, but nobody seems to want to interact. So yesterday and the day before, I went back and kind of looked. I have some really great shows. And just go look at any one of them. Play it as, wallpaper while you're doing, cleaning, doing the laundry. So, how much time do I have left here? Oh, about 20 minutes. So, I'll go back to Chris.
Joining me to discuss the crisis in higher education is Ellen Schrecker, retired professor of history at Yeshiva University and the author of numerous books, including her latest, The Lost Promise: American Universities in the 1960s. In the book, you argue that the upheavals on campus in the 1960s laid the groundwork for the assault against higher education. But before we go into that, you contrast what was happening in the United States and at the universities with the early periods of the Cold War. You note that there was no blacklist. The expansive job market not only enabled the protagonists in your book to find new academic positions once they were removed, it removed the fear that had previously constrained colleagues from making a fuss. More professors were willing to stand up for sanctioned colleagues, refusing to countenance violations of academic freedom and professional autonomy. You at one point in the book call this the golden age. We're talking about the 1960s of higher education. But just to begin, what did we come out of? Because people had to sign loyalty oaths in the 1950s. I remember Sheldon Woolen telling me that he signed one. He said he'd signed one in the military. It doesn't make any difference if he signed one to teach at Berkeley. But just set the stage before we go into the 60s.
Sure. What the 60s followed was McCarthyism, which I have written about as well. And during the late 40s and 1950s, there was a massive political chill on American campuses. We all know about Joe McCarthy and Have You No Decency, Sir? And we know as well about J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI, who was collecting political information of a sort of conservative nature for more than 100,000 people at least. This was a period of repression. There were congressional investigations. There were blacklists. In my own work, I interviewed more than 100 faculty members who lost their jobs for political reasons during the during the late 40s and 1950s. The irony here is that at the same time that Hoover and McCarthy were running roughshod over the First Amendment, colleges and universities were experiencing their quote unquote golden age. They were experiencing a moment when the American people were incredibly supportive of higher education. The GI Bill after World War II brought a whole new cohort of students onto American campuses, which were no longer mainly for the elite, but were educating middle class, lower middle class, not too many working class or lower class Americans, and was expanding enormously, as were faculty members who really benefited from this so-called golden age. There was money being thrown at people, myself included, to go to graduate school, to get a PhD, and then, as people today would be salivating about, people could get jobs.
Well-paying tenure jobs.
Well-paying tenured and tenure-track jobs. And as you noted earlier, if they were fired for political reasons, they would find another one. There were so many jobs.
Which wasn't true in the 50s. And I remember from your earlier book on McCarthyism, which I didn't know until I read your book, the FBI would go even into high schools with lists of professors or teachers that they wanted removed without any evidence at all. And these people would be instantly dismissed, and then they were blacklisted. They couldn't get hired anywhere else.
Right. But those, by the mid-50s, Sputnik in 1957, when the Soviet Union sent the first satellite up into orbit, at that point, higher education, especially, of course, in the sciences, was considered a matter of national security. So they were really throwing federal money. States were sort of looking to build up their universities. They wanted to have the prestige as well as the winning football teams. And it was really a genuine golden age for people who were interested in ideas. It was very exciting to be a graduate student in the late 1950s and early 60s.
I want to, just as an aside, talk about the historically black institutions, because you mentioned Philander Smith College in Little Rock, and that because of anti-Semitism, Jewish refugees often ended up at these institutions. This is not in your book. I just happen to know. Also, a lot of blacklisted professors ended up at colleges like Philander Smith in Little Rock, and Philander Smith College is where the great theologian, the radical theologian James Cone, was educated. And I just thought that was fascinating, that because of anti-Semitism and because of McCarthyism and because historically black institutions were considered or marginalized in second tier, you often had these tremendous faculties on them at that particular time. So let's start with the beginning of the unrest on the universities. You spend a lot of time in the book talking about the free speech movement at Berkeley and the importance of teach-ins, which I didn't quite get in the book, how important those were. So perhaps you can speak about that.
Okay, but I want to speak, since you're actually discuss those black colleges and universities, HBCUs, is of course where the 60s began to a large extent, because it's the students at schools like Fisk University in Nashville or Moorhead and Spelman in Atlanta that really began the really jump-started the civil rights movement in a way that brought political activism first to their own campuses and then to the rest of the country. And the one of the things I discovered was that most of the leaders of the what we might call the academic left had in one way or another been involved with the civil rights movement before the Vietnam War, before the Berkeley Free Speech movement. They had been working with the main civil rights organizations fighting for racial equality. So it's incredibly important to make that connection.
So that's why, at this present time, they're going after the woke movement, and that's the issue. It's not to be woke, but to be awake, consciously aware I am, and consciously intent. Whatever you do, have conscious intent behind it. Those are two prayers or mantras that I say 20, 30 times a day. And every time, I'm doing something and it looks like, this ain't going to work, but I conscious intent, I am consciously aware I am. I kind of, look, there's the right way to do it. Okay. And that worked out. And that's when I say, thank you, God. Because it wasn't me that did that. It was God's unconditionally loving understanding of who and what we are, right? So, let's see. Oh, yeah. About another 15 minutes. So, that's the story. I would love it if someone could throw something in my PayPal, or if you want to get a hold of me, the Dude Awake 42 at Gmail, the Dude Awake 42 at Gmail. All small case, one thing. The Dude Awake 42 at Gmail. So I look forward to, let's see if anyone has gotten ahead on me, on my email. And I would surely love some comments over there. And, tell your people about this. Subscribe, hit that bell, all the above. Let's see what.
Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. President Joe Biden and Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy have agreed to a tentative deal that would suspend the limit on the U.S. national debt until 2025. Biden said Saturday the compromise agreement would prevent the U.S. from defaulting on its loans, something Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says could happen as soon as June 5th unless members of Congress move quickly to raise the debt ceiling.
It takes the threat of catastrophic default off the table, protects our hard-earned and historic economic recovery, and the agreement also represents a compromise, which means no one got everything they want. But that's the responsibility of governing.
The deal calls for non-military discretionary spending to remain mostly flat, while boosting military spending by about 3%. It would cut IRS funding and would add new work requirements for some recipients of food assistance and temporary aid for needy families, or TANF program. The deal would also lift a moratorium on student loan payments and would fast-track the approval and construction of the proposed $6.6 billion Mountain Valley Pipeline in Virginia and West Virginia. We'll have more on the debt ceiling after headlines. Sudan's army has agreed to extend a ceasefire with a rival paramilitary group for a further 5 days, despite ongoing breaches of a week-long truce.
So I lived in Roanoke, Virginia, where that Mountain Valley thing was going right through. And there were a bunch of rich people who lived up in Floyd and that of the mountain range, who were all got their nose, they were experiencing what the black people had experienced down on Henry Street in the city of Roanoke in the 60s when, Robert Moses put a expressway right through their business section and destroyed it, right? Roanoke had one of the most vibrant black communities. Black education was amazing. And when Virginia, when Brown came through, Virginia unplugged from public education. So the rich white people had their political buddies sell them the public schools for, like 1 penny on the dollar, and they made private schools, Ku Klux Klan Christian schools, and left everyone in the drift. And poor white people got it the worst because the black community was the seventh largest economy in the freaking world. Jim Crow black community in the 40s and 50s and 60s was the seventh largest economy in the world. That's why we got the Voting Act of 1965. We destroyed Jim Crow, so the economic base of the black folk disappeared, and all they could do was beg for the federal government to give them stuff. Right? And now it's being taken away. You heard Amy talking about SNAP and other things that, I was telling you how someone was, you need to work. Thank you, darling.
You're welcome.
You might freshen up my coffee a little bit.
Yes, sir. I'll bring you some back.
Okay. So that's where we're at. And so when they were talking about, fast tracking the pipeline, so that all of the Plowshare people, the environmental people, they all got organized to stop the pipeline, but only stop it in their neighborhood, right? So, these guys actually still dug through their neighborhood and put the pipe there, and then stopped. They because they took them to court, and when it finally the court thing went all the way, they just got a kind of a stay. Because 98% of that pipeline was already done. And see, what people don't realize, the pipeline needs to be put there if you're going to have electric cars, because the pipeline went right through where the United States has its largest part of the distribution of the grid. Instead of having to build a couple of new nuclear plants that'll take 50 years, all I have to do is drop, tractor trailer sized gas turbines along that pipeline where the utility power line, the high voltage guys are. They put 20 of those suckers up in the mountains, and bingo, they have as much juice as 2 nuclear power plants without worrying about the, where to put the nuclear waste or any of the 20 years and $5 billion, or $20 million, they can have the same amount of electricity, and they can double the current in the present major backbone of the power lines. And they put, in the 20 years I was there, they put 5 new 980 lines in there to be distributed on either side of the Great Divide. And so this was all scripted. This was all known what was happening. Tesla became what it was, not because Elon Musk, but because it was scripted, And SpaceX is because he didn't invent anything, didn't know anything. He's a total doorknob, All those guys are, micro penis, Billy Boy is, they all are, Mr. Apple, they all are. There isn't a single genius amongst the bunch, And all the geniuses were like my sweetie, who invented the algorithm for her PhD thesis. And that one algorithm is the foundation, the cinder block of computer graphics. Her algorithm it allowed a continuous stream of an animation to move in 3 dimensions at once. Right? Before, each frame had to have its own algorithm, right? Cost a fortune to computer graphics. She made it economically feasible. Did they give her a great job? No. They gave her a PhD. She was the smartest human being on the planet. She was my girlfriend for about 4 years. And that's because she just did not mix. It was like oil and vinegar. Thank you, sweetie.
You're welcome.
It's like oil and vinegar, right? But me, I knew, I had been part of that scene. I had been part of Xerox PARC with Grandpa's Xerox in New York. And I went to California a couple of times with him when he was setting that up. Because he basically, the operating system that Microsoft uses came out of that. The mouse came out of that. instead of writing programs, but just moving a mouse onto a picture and clicking it, came out of Xerox PARC. Virtually everything that is, personal computing. That's what Grandpa, he made, electrostatic photocopying instead of, the mimeograph machine. He did that, and then he gave us personal computing. And when he went back to the the boardroom in New York and said, "Hey, we're gonna," they said, "What are you doing in California? What are you buying all this real estate? What are you starting this Xerox PARC thing up? What is it?" He goes, "Well, I got bored. You guys are running the business. I'm inventing a new one." "What's that?" "Personal computing." "No, that's IBM. No, we're not doing that." And so he said, "Screw you. I own most of this corporation." He realized he didn't, and he had lost control. And so he was going to cash in and just do that. And he basically said, "Screw it." And so he handed that technology over to a number of people who then went off and started Apple and started Microsoft and started Sun and started Canon and started all of these. I mean, Canon already existed, but not electronically. And HD or DA, the top 10 companies basically got all the technology from Grandpa Xerox. And Grandpa Xerox basically was, that movie Man Who Fell to Earth. That was Grandpa Xerox. And also Mr. Polaroid and a few other guys. That character that David Bowie played was a few of those guys. Nikola Tesla, kind of all rolled up into one alien creature. And so it's more and more, what are you going to do? We are coming into a period where things are going to change. And either, if you are not consciously aware, conscious intent, I am, I'm living like a millionaire on $400 a month. Can you do that? I could survive comfortably. The people who are moving in want to turn it into something it can never be. And if they do, it'll destroy them, because Colonel Sanders, he's been there 2 years. He could have, and I tried to guide him into it. You've left Florida, you left that hustle bustle, you wanted here. First 4 months that he was there with his wife, he was moving into that. But then he just had to go back to his old ways. So he did. And it's not going to, I'm going to try one more time to talk to him about it. I don't think so. So it's not going to be pretty. That's what I can say. Well, anyway, I'll talk to you later. I'm about out of time, and I have other things to go do, and I'm going to go do it. Okay?